Washington Commanders be open to trading the number 2 pick in this year's NFL draft? We're going to be breaking that down on today's show. Welcome to the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, as we got an interesting show to dive into, as I truly do believe that the Washington Commanders are a lot more open to trading down in this year's draft than a lot of people think. I'll give you guys my thoughts here in a second, but first, I want to get to this quote from Brian Diardo, who's pretty tapped in with Washington, and he had this report early on today. He says, in an unorthodox move, the Commanders brass is meeting with top quarterback prospects Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, and J.J. McCarthy at the same time, according to Sports Illustrated. The meetings will begin Tuesday night and run through Wednesday. Also a key note here, Michael Penix was also involved in those meetings. And this is why I think the Commanders are more open to trading down than a whole lot of people think. Why would Washington, as we are a week away from the NFL draft starting, still be going through this process of sitting all these quarterbacks down and still getting to know them, doing whatever they have to do? If they weren't already set on one, I feel like they would just be meeting with that guy, because we have heard reports that they are all in on Jayden Daniels. He's been the quarterback linked to them the most. Well, then why would they be bringing in other quarterbacks? Why would they be bringing in Michael Penix a week before the draft? I think there's a lot of conflicting thoughts and conflicting opinions in that Washington Commanders front office and in that whole brass, and I think they're a whole lot more open to trading down, and I think they're keeping all options on the table. I think they're saying, you know what, if we don't get an offer that completely blows us away, we are going to sit there at pick number 2 and draft a quarterback. But with them going through this whole process and bringing in 4 quarterbacks a week before the draft, and it's not one of those situations where they don't know who's going to go number 1. It is no doubt going to be Caleb Williams. But why would the Commanders bring in all those guys and put them through this whole process if they were not already set on one quarterback? I just think there's a lot of juice to this, and I think the Vikings could be that team that may be calling Washington maybe over the net or maybe next week before the draft and trying to land their guy Drake Maye. We'll dive into that here in a second, but first I got to make sure all of you guys are subscribed here to Vikings Now by Chat Sports. We are in a subscriber battle with probably the team I hate the most in the NFL, in Saints Now by Chat Sports. They got a 2,000 sub lead on us, but I want to catch them by the end of the NFL draft. So if you guys are new here and have not hit subscribe yet, I really encourage you to do so. Help me out. It's a great message to send to my bosses that we want more kind of resources and ammunition thrown into this Vikings channel. So hit that sub button right now. Lock us in as you go to Vikings YouTube channel. And hey, also if you guys just want to stick at the Saints fans as well, that's also another great reason to do so. So now, what would a trade look like for the Minnesota Vikings in terms of them trading up with Washington? A lot of you guys are not going to like the trade idea I have, but first, I do want to go back and look at past draft day trades that have gone down in the NFL. So let's talk about this first trade here. So this was when the Eagles did select Carson Wentz when they traded up to number 2 overall. They had the 8th pick, and they gave up 2 fourths, a 3rd, and a future first. So not a big haul, but also they were only moving up 8 spots. Well, what about Washington? When they did trade to go get RG3 back in the day, they gave up a haul for him. They gave up the 6th pick. They gave up a 2nd-round pick, and then they also gave up 2 additional first-round picks to only move up 4 spots. I think people need to realize you can go on any draft chart you want, and they don't incorporate the QB tax, but also they don't incorporate the tax that team at pick number 2, 3, or 4 may want to draft a quarterback themselves. So this is the trade I cooked up, and a lot of you guys may freak out here, but honestly, I think I would do it. So it would be the Minnesota Vikings trading up and landing the number 2 overall pick, but they would be giving up an absolute haul. They'd be giving up picks 11 and 23, and then also 2 first-round picks over the next 2 seasons, 2025 and 2026. I get it. This is an absolute haul for the Minnesota Vikings to do it. But what if Drake Maye ends up being Justin Herbert? What if he ends up being Josh Allen? What if he is a true top 5 quarterback in the NFL? Are you really going to be worried about those future first-round picks? I really don't think so. Now, you may be saying this to yourself. Well, Patrick, why would Washington even consider? Why would they even consider moving off the number 2 overall pick? Well, let's break it down. My number one reason, their roster just frankly is not ready for a rookie quarterback. I've had the same thoughts on the Commanders and the Patriots that I just don't believe they're a good landing spot for a rookie QB. And if I was like Jayden Daniels' friend, family member, whatever it may be, or former teammate, I would be really hoping he doesn't go to Washington. Because are they ready for a rookie quarterback to step in there week 1 and be the starter? Hell no. In terms of the Vikings, are they ready? 100% yes. And the Vikings offer the ability to a rookie quarterback to sit for 1 season. And then also this with Washington. Maybe they still want to draft a quarterback. You still have other great options. You have a guy like Michael Penix, who they are meeting with this week. A week before the draft, the Washington Commanders are meeting with Michael Penix. And I'll tell you what, they aren't meeting with him to draft him number 2. They are meeting with him in a potential trade down where they still get a quarterback. So they still have that option. And then number 3 for me. Let's just say, I could also say this for the Minnesota Vikings. Even if they would trade up for Drake Maye and he doesn't work out and he's just one of the biggest busts of all time, yes, the Vikings staff could get fired as well. But if you're Washington, new head coach, new GM in the building, are you willing to kind of risk that number 2 pick on a quarterback that maybe necessarily you don't truly love? I don't know. It could get them fired if he doesn't work out. Then also number 4, and I think this is where the Vikings come into play. They would give them an overwhelming offer. Let's just say Washington's sitting there, and this kind of ties into my 5th point, that they don't love any quarterbacks. Let's just say they like Drake Maye. They like Jayden Daniels. They like J.J. McCarthy. But they don't love any of these quarterbacks. I could see them taking an offer from the Minnesota Vikings like this one where you are legitimately giving up. Yes, it would be a pick swap, 11-2, and then 3 additional first-round picks. But I think that would be the tax it would require for the Vikings to move up from 11 to 2. You would have to give up pick 23. You would have to give up a future first-round pick. And also with this trade, if, let's just say Kwesi's already got this on the table, if you're Washington and you see this come through and you're GM Adam Peters, you are definitely considering this trade. You are sitting there and thinking, man, we could go get Penix at 11 and then have 3 more first-round picks coming in. I don't know. I understand this is a haul, but Vikings fans, just please remember this. What if Drake Maye ends up being Josh Allen? What if he ends up being Justin Herbert? And I am so sick and tired of being stuck in this NFL purgatory where the Vikings aren't good enough to compete for championships, but they also aren't bad enough to be at the top of the draft and draft a quarterback. Because think about this. You're going to give Drake Maye or whoever it is 3 seasons, no doubt, correct? So you're going to get, and also if he sits a year, you're going to give him probably 3 after that. Are you really concerned about that first-round pick in 25 and 26? And let's just say Drake Maye ends up being Justin Herbert. These picks could be in the early to late 20s potentially. But enough of my thoughts. Let me know what you guys have to say. Would you accept this trade? Or maybe you're a Washington Commanders fan watching today's show. Let me know your thoughts. Give me an A for accept or give me a D for decline. I am very curious to see what you Vikings fans have to say about this one. This is an absolute haul. But let me know your thoughts. Vikings fan or a Commanders fan, let me know if you would do it. I'm assuming a lot of you guys may say D for decline, but man, if it would be for Drake Maye, I would definitely consider it. But coming up next, I do have a quote from Jeremy Fowler that is suggesting that the Vikings could be all in on Drake Maye. And that's why I kind of connect this to the Commanders side of the story where, maybe the Minnesota Vikings are truly considering sending a godfather an overwhelming offer to go get the North Carolina quarterback. We'll get into that in a second. But first off, I do want to tell you guys about today's sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. If you guys head to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use promo code CLNS, we will match your first deposit up to $100. Even though the football season is not on right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves are starting their playoff run this Saturday versus the Phoenix Suns. So if you guys want to create a lineup for that game, do it at Prize Picks. Make sure you guys head to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use that promo code CLNS, and we're going to match your first deposit up to $100. It's simple how you play. You just pick 2 or more players. Then you're going to choose more than or less than on their stat projections, and you guys can start seeing the cash roll in today. It could be a boring game, or it could be a game that maybe you don't think has a lot of juice to it. I'll tell you what, the number one way to add juice to a game, create a Prize Picks lineup. I'll put this link for you guys in the comment section and description of today's show. Check them out. It's prizepicks.com/CLNS and use promo code CLNS, and we'll match your first deposit up to $100. So are the Minnesota Vikings all in on Drake Maye? You know, I've always have, people in the Chat Sports office, they always ask me like, hey, Seeps, who do you think is the number one option for the Minnesota Vikings front office and their coaching staff heading in the next season? I've been in the camp that I think it's Drake Maye, and actually ESPN's very own Jeremy Fowler thinks that Drake Maye would be a perfect fit in Minnesota. This is what he had to say. He says multiple evaluators pointed out Minnesota is the perfect place for Maye in that regard. Should the Vikings move up to get him? Scouts noted he's smart, relaxed, and even witty in interviews. And listen, this just gets me to this point. And I haven't really came out and said officially who is my number one choice for the Vikings, in terms of who I want them to draft, but I think I'm at that point right now. Drake Maye is my number one choice. And, I was debating between him and J.J. McCarthy because you got to consider, it would take a whole lot more if the Vikings trade up to go get Drake Maye in comparison for McCarthy, but I think it would be worth it. And I would be willing to give up both years first and the next 2 first-round picks to go and get him because of this. Look at the Vikings roster. I want everybody to imagine. Let's just change out Drake Maye's name for Justin Herbert because that's a comparison we have gotten. That's what a lot of scouts think he has the potential to be. Let's just say he ends up being him. Could you imagine Justin Herbert on this roster right now? What would we be saying about the Vikings heading into next season? Super Bowl contenders? NFC North favorites? NFC favorites? 100% we would be saying that. So I understand it is hard to pull the trigger on that trade I was talking about early on in today's show. But it would be worth it if this guy ends up being who he is. That's why he is my number one choice for Minnesota. Number 2 for me, J.J. McCarthy. I understand J.J. McCarthy. There's a lot of haters out there. There's a lot of people that I just don't think fully understands his game. But he is by far the number 2 choice for me. And there's a big gap between him and Jayden Daniels. Number 1. And I know quarterback wins are not the end-all, be-all when evaluating a quarterback. But I think it speaks to something about him dating back to his freshman year of high school. He has only lost 3 games he started. Really think about that. He has lost 3 games he has started. Also, I like this aspect. He's the youngest quarterback in this year's draft class. So, I kind of get bothered when I see people, comparing Daniels to J.J. McCarthy, and they're like, oh, look at Daniels. He threw the ball downfield way more. He's a way better thrower. He's got way better tape this past season. And listen, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think when you're evaluating these quarterbacks, you kind of have to project a little bit. And me projecting where J.J. McCarthy would be in 3 years, considering Jayden Daniels is 3 classes ahead of McCarthy, I think J.J. is going to be significantly better than him. So if I had to pick a quarterback to start, week 1 next season, J.J. McCarthy might not be top 5 on my list. But in terms of projecting what they could be in the NFL, J.J. is number 2 for me. And then number 3 is Jayden Daniels. I like Jayden Daniels a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of him as other people, but I think he would work out in Minnesota. But I don't know. I just have concerns that he's only really had 1 solid year of production in his entire career in college, and that was his past season when he was throwing to Brian Thomas. He was throwing to Malik Neighbors. So I just think that's, some red flags there in his game. But overall, again, second best quarterback in this year's class will be whoever the hell the Minnesota Vikings pick. But maybe you guys disagree with me. Maybe you want to call me an idiot. Do it down in the comments section. Pick a quarterback for me. Give me a DM for Drake Maye. Give me a JJ for JJ McCarthy. Or give me a JD for Jayden Daniels. Curious to see what you guys have to say. Hopefully I maybe swung a couple of opinions down below about maybe having McCarthy and Maye over Daniels. But hey, that's why I love Chat Sports. Love getting you guys involved and love hearing your guys' thoughts and reading the comments section. But also, guys, I want to ask you guys to hit that sub button. We are going to be going live for the draft. So if you guys haven't already, haven't subbed to the channel just yet, I would really appreciate it if you guys could. Can't wait for the NFL draft. It's going to be a ton of fun. And maybe, just maybe, the Vikings will pull off the impossible and trade up to number 2 and land Drake Maye in this year's draft. We'll obviously just have to wait and see. But see y'all next time. As always, SKOL Vikes.